so we're going to go over the procedure of field checking the Model 3 blower door. We're going to start by doing a leakage and damage test on the flow sensor, and that's this white cap here on the end of the motor. And basically what we're checking on it is we want to make sure that there's no damage to it or the hose that runs up to the flow port on top of the blower door, and then also we're looking for like any kind of cracks and stuff in the actual housing. So first you just want to kind of do a visual. I want to make sure it's mounted correctly, that these 3 metal clips are holding it nice and snug on the motor. I'm just looking at the housing, making sure there's no cracks, breaks to the actual housing, and then you'll kind of want to fill up this tube line and just see if you can feel or see anything that looks suspect as far as a hole or crack or whatever, because this needs to be one solid tube from this port all the way down and the sensor. We don't want any leakage in them. And how we check for the leakage is we're going to take just some masking tape, and there's four sensing holes on the flow sensor, and they're kind of positioned at 10 o'clock, 2 o'clock, 4 o'clock, and 6 o'clock on the housing, and we're going to cover those sensing holes. All right, so I got the four sensing holes covered with masking tape, and my visual inspection, I don't see anything that looks suspect. Everything looks good. The housing feels like it's mounted correctly, solid. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take just a piece of tubing and make sure you check whatever tubing you're using during your test that it don't have a hole in it, because that could screw up your test. But I'll connect this to the flow port on top of the blower door, and I'm going to create a vacuum in this hose line, and I'm going to, after I create a vacuum by sucking on it, I'm going to stick my tongue on it, and it should hold for 5 seconds. If it don't hold for 5 seconds, then there is leakage somewhere, either in the flow sensor or in the tubing. So let me run this test real quick. So it held for the 5 seconds. When I pulled it off my tongue, I could hear it and feel like the suction release. So this one does pass the leakage test. If it did not pass the leakage test and I couldn't create a suction that would hold for 5 or more seconds, I'd want to take a deeper look into this hose running up, and also at the sensor housing, make sure that I didn't miss any kind of cracks or something that I could identify. We did reach out to the Energy Conservatory and kind of ask them what they suggest if we did have a leaky flow sensor, and they said that we can change out ourselves in the field some of this tubing, but if it got into where like this housing was cracked or something, you're definitely going to have to reach out to them and probably get some parts or something to fix the problem. So just be aware of that, and make sure after you get done doing this test that you uncover the flow sensing ports. So all right, so now we're going to conduct the flow sensor position test, and this is easier to do up on a table, kind of like we have here, versus on the ground. But we'll just take our blower door, lay it on its side, and we're going to take some type of like a straight edge or a ruler, and we're going to lay that across the housing, And basically what we're going to be measuring is this gap in between the bottom edge of our ruler and the flow sensor housing. And we want to be, the specifications on this are, you want to be a 1/4 inch plus or minus a 1/16. So we basically want to be between 3/16 and 5/16 of an inch on here. So I got my ruler set up here, and I'm about 3/16 of an inch on this one. So our housing's set in, our flow sensor's set at the right depth. In the guidance that the field conservatory gives us, they said if it's out of those ranges to contact them. I went through the process of contacting them and asked them, what their typical recommendation is on this, and they said typically they just kind of walk you through or help you adjust that fan motor slightly so that the flow sensors are set at the right depth. And what that kind of will look like is if you take this cage off the back side of your blower door or your blower, you can get to the motor mount right here on the inside and loosen that up, and that'll allow you to adjust that fan flow sensor either in or out a little bit for what you need. Aside from that, if you notice like there's some extensive damage as far as the motor mount is bent, there's something broken, your fan blades are like rubbing on the housing, something like that, you're going to want to send your blower door in or contact the Energy Conservatory, because that's a little more extensive than what you want to get into. But if you just need to slightly move the motor in or out to meet that standard, then you can just by doing that. So. All right, so some kind of general maintenance items in regards to our blower doors. You want to examine the motor cooling holes around like the exterior of the motor and make sure they're not all clogged up with dust. You could either use like a vacuum with a brush or compressed air and kind of blow those out to make sure that motor can cool off. That's not going to get too hot while you're operating it. And this is kind of the back side, and then you got this side over here. You can see it's got holes on both sides of the motor. And then the other thing is you want to check and make sure your blades are about 1/4 inch off of the housing, so they're not rubbing onto the housing. Another thing to inspect is just like electrical wires. On this one, you can just see you got your electrical wires kind of running up. You're just checking, making sure nothing's been cut or any kind of issues with wiring. If you're going to be running the blower door for long periods of time, like when you're doing air sealing, you want to make sure there's a flow ring on it, because that helps kind of guide that cool air onto the blower motor and will help keep it cooled down. If the motor gets too hot, it will shut down, and so that could be an indication if your blower motor or if your blower door keeps shutting down on you. You may not be getting enough airflow, so you may want to inspect the motor and see if it's not getting enough airflow on it. The fan should not be left running unattended, and you do want to keep people and pets away as much as possible when you're operating the fan. And then if the fan guards, fan blades, any of that stuff kind of becomes damaged, do not operate the blower door until you can either send it in or call the Energy Conservatory and work through it with them. So those are some of the maintenance routine checks that you should be doing on your blower door. All right, so the Energy Conservatory has a form to kind of track when you're inspecting your equipment. You want to circle like we just did the blower door. So you want to circle what equipment it is, the serial number, the date you performed the inspection, the technician that inspected it, and if it passed the leakage test, and if it passed the position test.